Welcome to the Blend podcast. So excited to have you guys here today. We've got some amazing topics that we're going to dig into. First, welcoming two of our practitioners here to our call. We've got Ryan Serpan, who's our head of CX practice, really digging into customer experience and what enterprises should be thinking about as the future of customer experience. And we have Jordan Cardonick, who is a part of that practice team, also leading customer experience platforms and measurement. I'm so excited to have you guys here today. We've got an amazing topic. So, for today, we're going to dig into this agentic shift when AI becomes a new commerce channel and what enterprises should be thinking about in terms of this new channel. Brian, why don't you kick it off and tell us kind of what you're seeing and what is AI doing to this landscape?
Yeah, I think that's maybe the most exciting question we have in the space of CX in decades, right? When we think about how things emerged in the Web 2.0 era, the Web 3.0 era, and now we've hit the Web AI era. And I think what gets me the most excited as a CX practitioner is watching people open up to how they utilize an LLM to change their behavior, right? So simple things like watching somebody do vacation planning for the first time with an LLM and realizing the power of how quickly you can synergize thoughts, bring things together, get deep, comprehensive research on an area of the world you've never been to, and plan a vacation around it. That's a wonderful use of an LLM that's changed the entire landscape of customer experience. And as these AI agents and these conversational interfaces become more practiced and standard experiences, we're going to see, I think, more adoption of that, more comfort level with allowing the agent to answer more questions and do more deep thinking. Then that comes, of course, with the other side of it, which is we better make sure those experiences are very well done and represent our brands quite well, right? So I think as I think about that as the landscape of where we're going, it's extremely palpable that there's a whole new paradigm coming in how customers interact with our brands, right?
So it's so interesting because there's so much information at an end user or customer's fingertips. Like you said, the one click of a button, one prompt to an AI, and suddenly there's an entire AI assistant there to help you with anything that you need. So, what takes that experience though and makes it really tangible for an actual customer? How do we know that this is real and not just hype or just a moment in time? How do we know this is really shifting customer behavior?
Yeah, we can see the trends that are out there now that are indicating that by 2030 they're forecasting about $400 billion in agentic commerce. This is coming. People are already starting to use these things to make decisions. And when you look at this kind of anti-Amazon contingent of Google, Target, Best Buy, Walmart that have come together to really start establishing this universal commerce protocol, UCP, the technical infrastructure is now being put in place to seamlessly connect that experience with all of the payment operations, with all of the add to cart operations, really moving into this zero click type of dynamic. So to the web AI point, the feasibility and the ease of doing all of these operations are coming there, and they're starting with retail, they're starting with commerce, and really making it simple for people to go out and ask for what is the best compatible product with these other things that I have in my household, and literally take that all the way from listing options, listing your product of interest, adding that to cart, and now being able to purchase it and send it to your home, all from a single interface, all from a single experience, is really game changing, and ultimately is going to cause people to start adapting and moving further in that place, with again getting more comfort in retail, and then likely starting to see this expand into hospitality. I think our friends in financial services might be a little bit later to the game given all of the dynamics there, but the comfort with retail, the comfort with those type of more kind of low risk type of buying behaviors are going to lead to this becoming really game changing, and creating completely different experiences where I can do all of my retail shopping for my upcoming trip and get the flight and get the hotel and get the rental car in one prompt, making purchases across 5, 6, 7 different companies, is going to be a very interesting dynamic for us to see how it evolves.
It's really interesting too that you say that because we're seeing all these different changes in the landscape and of course, tools that are now available, user behavior as they learn how to use those tools, they learn how to do those types of searches, because it is a totally new behavior that we're seeing for the first time. Well, I guess, and tossing this question back over to Ryan, what are you seeing in terms of adoption of people actually using AI to start doing those searches? Aside for an enterprise, how do they help control that experience? They want a consistent user experience. They want to be able to monetize those interactions. But we all know that using AI, it's extremely dependent on the end user. And so, how do we kind of bridge that adoption with that brand control?
Well, I think as the enterprise, I'm going to kind of reverse the answer to your question because I think at the enterprise level, it's incumbent upon us to design systems that can adapt to contextual changes during a conversation. I think right now it's hard to break our mindset from software patterns. Software patterns are very linear. Do this action, click a button, and something happens. After you click the button, do a configuration, click a button again, something happens. But the human brain doesn't actually think that way. It reasons and it thinks in contextual, changes over time. How do I create a front end experience that mirrors how human contextual like understanding? And that's a behavior change we're all going to have to get ready for, right? And I think back to like the iPhone moment where all of a sudden I could touch a screen with no haptic feedback, but something happened and it was and now I had a whole screen and I could start interacting with it. And it's just second nature to us today, right? Nobody even thinks about it. My children think every screen can be touched, right? So we have to start thinking about it like that. When you ask the question now, how are users adopting it and how are we tracking that? To me, this is one of those situations where every single minute of every single day, every single interaction we do, everyone's moving faster and faster with understanding how to use LLMs in a better, more efficient way. Just a year ago, we'd walk into a boardroom and start talking about things, and there was a lot of blank stares, a lot of misunderstanding, a lot of mixed terminology. Now all of a sudden, people are vibe coding new applications over the weekend like it's just the latest thing that you should be doing. I can't even begin to imagine the adoption curve for younger and younger generations where, my kids are writing music today with AI and they're 6 years old, right? And so what that's going to look like is just going to be this acceleration curve that we can't keep up with to some degree if we don't rethink how we want these things to work on a front end. So how does an enterprise get ready? It's going to sound a little bit old fashioned, but data, 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 data. Like we have to get ourselves in a place where the data around the customer, the experiences I've had, the journeys I've been on, the products that I've bought, my sentiment when I've been on calls are all available to the AI in a safe and governed and secure way, but that allow the agents that we create that represent our brands on the front end to have all of the context that they need to bring those things to life, right? And one of the ways we like to talk about it at Blend is you should want these agents to speak to your customer the way you would. And if I walk into your store and I've walked into your store every day for 10 years, you know my name, I know your name, I know your face, you know mine, you know my favorite pastry to buy in the morning, and you know the way I like my coffee. That's contextual relevance that we can generate with each other. AI is unlocking that in digital in ways we've never imagined before. And so being ready for that is still going to root itself on the core problem of is your data ready to empower that experience and maintain the governance and control you need? So I think that's probably the best way to think about where we should be today. But in a year from now, I would hope that problem is not our problem, and we're really working harder on building more relevancy into our agents.
So, Jordan, what's your take on this? Because we talk about data readiness and assuming a client or an enterprise has data readiness and they're also building the solutions that can mirror things like brand voice, they're still going to look to measure, and that's what you focus on every day. So, how do we measure that and how do we build that over time and, beyond just the next 6 months or 12 months in the year?
Yeah, there's a few different areas to take this conversation on the measurement, because in some ways the kind of AI optimization is going to look and feel in some ways similar to how we managed organic search for years and years and years, where we took data signals and we understood how the algorithms could work and we understood ranking and we started to essentially manipulate that based on the things that we understood for Google and Bing. In the LLM world, there's some patterns and some structures that are existing, but it's more of now focused on talking about, computer to computer type of nonsense and discussion, right? I need to feed it JSONs. I need to feed it schema. I need to feed structured information to the LLM consistently and continuously. I need to ensure that ultimately my various functions are now no longer built as a single e-commerce engine. That add to cart is no longer a button. That is a specific API function call that's going to allow for these agents to talk. So what's going to happen in that situation is, well, now I have to figure out the right metadata that's going to pass through so I can track what's the difference between the LLM that called that function versus someone that's still on the website and being able to do that. Again, thinking about organic search, well, we could track organic because it was the lack of reference data in the URL string and the lack of URL parameters. We don't have that benefit with the LLMs, but we could have IP addresses that can indicate when somebody came to the website via a link that the LLMs populated. But we also are going to be able to, again, using these new technologies that are evolving, be able to pass that metadata back into our systems to be able to track, well, what came in through the LLM channel versus what came through direct website, app, phone call, all of that fun stuff. And so as we start to establish our measurement frameworks, this is where a lot of the kind of push that we've felt over the last few years around cookieless future and deprecating data and not being able to have everything at the palm of our hands anymore is going to come into play, and being able to measure overall incrementality of the business, being able to use then the signals that we have to optimize individual parts and pieces. Yes, we should feed the LLMs the latest information so that when it's looking for the most rich, up-to-date content about what inventory we have on hand, we're going to trust that the system is using it properly. But then we're going to have to measure it with media mix models. We're going to have to measure it with test and learn and control, and being able to, again, manipulate the LLMs the way that we're going to be able to create, again, that ability to hyper focus on a particular audience segment, because we know that they're going to talk a certain way. And so when those individuals are at the LLM, we know it's them because, again, they use certain jargon, they have certain phrases. Again, colloquialism across the United States now becomes interesting. That is a way to differentiate people because that's what they're going to prompt with. And so how do we feed that in and then measure the results coming off of those prompts and seeing what the performance is? Like, this is the fun stuff that we're going to have to figure out. And so we're having a lot of conversations with clients trying to figure out between using the tools that are out there that are monitoring the LLMs, that visibility metric that's now possible with the prompting, with then the ability to take that and couple it with our business backend data to say, okay, well, an increase in visibility leads to this, and we know what increases visibility. So what are we now going to do to connect the dots and optimize those platforms accordingly with the data, using the APIs, using the protocols that are now in place to support that optimization?
But I think we have to also begin to prepare ourselves for an age in which we start to trust agents to optimize in a self-learning environment, rather than a traditional way we would think about it is like, data comes in, we've got a big dashboard, we run an analysis, we can create models off of that information. Now, with the next time we have an interaction, we can use that model to better define a target or a parameter or a thing that we want to do. What happens when we enter a world where I'm not actually the one talking to the LLM, but my agent is? Ryan creates a travel version of himself that wants to go do a whole entire planning, and now my agent is talking to your agent, and it's not Ryan. And are we going to be in a landscape where the brands are ready to represent themselves in that environment in the right way, because it can't distinguish, or it's going to have a hard time distinguishing who's who? It's going to, I think, lead to a world where visibility is not the end game, but certainly the measurement of customer experience is the end game. And we should have always been, working from there. In the ideal world, it was always about improving NPS or customer score or CLV, right? And that's going to be the most pure way to know if the things that we're doing is actually working. And I think that we're going to see that evolution happen, right?
We're really pushing clients and ourselves to think about this as a true transformation. I mean, we're not just talking about there's a new tool on the tool shelf. We're talking about we have to rethink the way that we completely operate and interact. We've got net new tools, new entire channels. We have new systems that have never had measurement defined before. So I guess, for both of you, help paint the picture between what are some baby steps that people should be thinking about today? Like things that exist in our ecosystem today that we should already be engaging with versus that big future picture of, your agents working with my agent and I'll have my people call your people and they'll figure it out together. Like there's a whole spectrum of, transformation that happens in between those.
Yeah, and I think this is where, depending on what industry you're in, your starting point will be a little bit different, but there's some general things that everyone at least should put in place. Again, there are the ability to track at least traffic from the LLMs to the website that you should do. You should make sure that your IPs are set up so you know traffic that came to the site from Claude, from ChatGPT, et cetera. That is a no regrets type of work to do. You should make sure that you are monitoring the volume of your performance, much the same way that you always should have with a media mix model, and be able to detect essentially if your base is changing without any real changes to your marketing and your influencers, right? We need to start indicating if there are some kind of unattributed or unknown shifts in our overall performance that we weren't expecting because we didn't actually put any kind of influence into the market. That is some no regrets work that you should start doing and be able to start monitoring what's happening. Obviously, for those in retail, in commerce that can start taking advantage of these things, you need to make sure that, again, the protocols are set up. There's a number of pilots that are being put in place today where you can start to actually action on this thing and take a look at what's happening. So if you're not having conversations with your marketing agency around getting in front of it, you're going to need to do that, because that's just going to mean you're losing out to all of these companies that are starting to take advantage of the monetization, the advertising that's coming, and the ability to start placing your own agents kind of in these experiences so that they are talking on your behalf. You don't want to get left behind in this situation. You're just going to be very limited number of agents that are there, and chats that you can have. If your brand is not keeping up to date, again, with that data, with the most recent information, with your pricing, with all of that stuff that it's going to be comparing to, and being able to put yourself in that situation, you're going to miss out, because these agents are going to make sure that, hey, if there's inventory on hand, I will recommend you. But if I check and you tell me that I can't complete that sale, you've just lost every single interaction moving forward when I'm going to check, because I can't trust that you're going to have the inventory on hand. So connecting the data dots, making sure that these things can start being put in place to feed the ecosystem is going to be really crucial to start developing.
I think we're also at a stage right now where enterprise need to start making some commitments to testing this with real tests and real tools. And there's certainly safer ways to do that. We can create synthetic representations of your customer. That's a very today thing. And you can experiment and test with how these things will impact customer experience right now with very, very high accuracy. But if you're not already thinking about how you would change the entire experience of shopping for a product, let's say on your website, through an agentic, variant of that, you're already, in my mind, starting to fall behind, because the speed at which this will happen is going to be almost astronomical. And so even simple things like my product catalog is heavily paginated with a lot of filtering and search going on right now. How can I move from that to an agent that helps me do that? That's a nice step to the future that, Caroline, we talked about, which is I don't ever even need filtering, because I can just talk to the agent about what I need, right? Walk me straight to the thing in the aisle here's the product that you're looking for. And so the experimentation's got to begin now, and that experimentation's got to be commitment. I think everyone, we can ring the bell of the never-ending MIT report that said 95% of these POCs are failing, and to me, that's actually more a signal of a lack of commitment to how we need to test and deploy agentic than it is anything else, right? Because if you've got a plan and you know where the road is headed, you got to stay on the road, even if it starts to rain. right? And you've got to be ready for that. So it's a slightly different answer than Jordan's in the sense that I think our principles of user experience design have got to reinvigorate the way we think about the use of these tools. And we've got to be ready for that. I mean, if you're not experimenting now, if you're not testing places to do that, then you're behind in that sense already as well.
And we're not talking about we're talking about the new, but we're also not talking about the impossible. Like we're seeing real solutions with our clients through that dedication of experimenting, building as a smaller scope and then scaling that up throughout an organization or across multiple business units. I mean, we're seeing real tangible solutions, and we bring the expertise to figure out those new things because they've never been done before. So there is that experimentation and the building of those solutions. So my closing question for you guys is, what should leaders be thinking about now? Like, what is step number one in terms of kind of educating themselves and getting a vision for where they want to go, and then also just kind of taking that first baby step if they're at the starting blocks on just making sure that they are building kind of that adaptation for where we're going in the future.
Yeah, I mean, look, this isn't the first time or the last time that we've had a new channel open up to us that we had to figure out, right? When all of a sudden digital advertising became a thing and we had paid search and then we had display and social and all of that stuff, right? We recognized the fact that there were emerging places that we can get in front of our customers and be able to deliver and add an experience to them that was in service of, again, going back to some of Google's early ethos, not being evil and just providing the best experience and the right experience to support the end need of the customer. We are entering that space now with the LLMs and the ability for us to deliver on a really good experience. There is going to be some conflict in there because of the monetization, because of the advertising. We are going to see, similar to, again, search again, black hat and white hat AI come up, and people being influenced by some of the wrong messaging. So I think there is going to be a lot, to Ryan's point, needing to test and understand what's right by the business versus what's right by the customer, and being able to thread that needle appropriately. Again, there's a lot of interesting studies out there that, if you would run 100 prompts of the same question, asking what's the 10 best brands, that list will be different for every single person that wrote that. And it doesn't inherently mean that that's a bad thing, that the order is different, that some of the listing is different, but it's about understanding that this isn't trying to be in first position all of the time. It's about needing to have that visibility, needing to know that your brand is always going to be at least represented in the right way. Sure, the order might change and it is what it is. But again, you're going to have other messaging, other advertising, other marketing that will always, at least if give you that at bat, and then augment it with the advertising, with the monetization that's going to happen there. So again, I think we've been in this predicament before with, where do I spend my next best dollar? And we should at least be taking the opportunity to start testing that now, figuring out what works for our business, because it's not going anywhere anytime soon. It's only going to drive more traffic. It's only going to have more eyeballs in this kind of zero click environment. And so we have to learn how to work in that atmosphere and use at least the self-containedness of it right now, given it's not everywhere. It's not every channel. It's not every industry. It's not everything, to at least figure out what works and kind of build our capabilities and be ready for when this really becomes a truly game-changing element. But we're not that far off from that date.
I'm going to answer your question with a bit of a vision statement. I think I would encourage every client out there to begin thinking about this next evolution as a change from software to conversation again. This is the moment in time where you can think very literally, who is the best brand ambassador you have in your company or in your business? Who is your best salesperson? Who is your best customer service representative? Who is your best brand ambassador, right? That can really get people to believe in what you're doing. And now you can amplify that at a scale that was never amplifiable before. And if you begin to think as a marketer or as a CX lead or a customer experience lead about how that could be a tangible way for you to be building your outreach to customers now, that's where we're going. And I think just that first thought experiment of if every single agent you had in the company was your best agent, what would be different for your brand today? If every single person you had in your company could speak to your value proposition and what you do the way that your number one is your CEO would, and that's every conversation that has that passion, what would your business look like? When you begin to kind of unbox that thinking around that's what we're creating with LLMs, and now LLMs become a channel, you can have your best people always available in that channel at all times and speak about your product and your value proposition and your reason to believe in ways that could never have existed before. And in fact, I think it's going to lead more consumers to high quality brands that live on their standards of good quality, seeing the customer through. They're going to be the ones who emerge and survive this era in a far better way than those that have poor product or low commitment to product and really are just good at direct response selling. The world is going to shift back to quality leads and quality drives, but you've got to be ready for that. And so that's the first step I would take is the thought experiment. And then from that thought experiment, say, am I committed to changing my business to be ready for that?
It's really invigorating, having this conversation about the art of the possible and, where this world is going now that AI is embedded into our day to day, embedded into our interactions with each other, interactions with the companies that we trust. And we want to see that experience echoed back to us. So, a lot to think about today and really appreciate the conversation. Thanks so much, Ryan. And, let's see what we can unpack in this next year together with all this amazing innovation.